Hello, everybody. This is Glenn Henderson and another episode of Win with Glenn, where we talk about how you can benefit from rock solid principles and life principles and business, as well as our personal things that you can take home personally and benefit. And I always want to remind me and you that when I say win with Glenn, it's not that you're winning because you're with me, but we're winning together. And one of the things that I like to do to win, one of the sure ways that I win is each time I have the opportunity to have Dr. Jim Chambers with me, because then I know for sure I'm going to
Yeah,
get some winning information. And so Jim Chambers is joining us again today. Jim, how are you doing?
I'm doing good. I'm doing good. It's hot in Arkansas. Hot,
Well,
muggy.
it's raining and thundering here, and with the great use of technology, hopefully we'll be able to get through this. But I do appreciate you taking the time out. We've been talking about this thing called change for quite some time, and is almost a curse word. And when you hear the word change, I'm reminded of something that I heard a long time ago, that people want change, but they don't want to change. And you
True.
have this model that you put together with IOL, the Institute of Organizational Leadership, years ago, that really focuses on change management. And before we dive into that, tell us a little bit about how that started and what change management is.
Yeah. Okay. Well, a number of years ago, the Institute for Organizational Leadership, really, the whole idea of it was to help organizations that need our help to figure out things that aren't working. It could be systems, strategy, structures, could be planning, leadership, whatever it is. So our whole thing is to help improve the organizational effectiveness of other companies. So that was kind of still is for all practical things. So what happened was a lot of companies were called asking, can you help us? We need to grow. We need to expand. We need to add some new things, new features, new territory, new clients, whatever it is, new services. How do we go through change so that we don't lose our best people in the process? How do we undergo a large or medium or even a small change in an organization without, causing damage to our reputation, to our clients, etc. Anyway, so I was hired to go down to Brazil and work on a project with another university, some universities in the US, as well as some corporations. So I spent a couple years just really doing research and homework on this. That's kind of my background anyway, is in research. And so I kept working on it, testing it, found out, finally we came down to a model that we could share with people so you're gonna expand in, let's say, into a new market in your company. You're gonna go into a new direction. And you don't want to lose employees, you don't want to lose clients, you don't want to lose market share. What are the things that you need to do or be conscious of that are not normally talked about in change management? So that's how this came about. And once we developed the model, then we took it out and we tested it in a lot of different environments in banking, manufacturing, military, NGO services, organizations, even churches that parachurch, as well as large church organizations. So that's just kind of quick clip about where it came from. Even today, we still have people using it on a regular basis with very positive results. So the chance to talk with you about it, because you and I've been involved with so many organizations going through change from startups to Fortune 500, Fortune 100, and they all have to, you know, manage what's going on as they change.
Right. Yeah, I thought about change, and is when you hear that word is kind of interesting, because we like predictability, we like saying, we like to know that things, frankly, are not going to change, and
Right.
yet we know. that I'm thinking about. I go to a restaurant and I have an expectation of what that meal is going to be like, what the experience is. I have the favorite thing that I want, and it's horrible that when I get there, it's changed.
Not
The
on the
menu,
menu anymore.
yeah, and so in that regard, I just hate that type of change. But then I share with people oftentimes when you go to if that did occur and you went to the same restaurant, you had the same meal, you had the same experience, after some period of time, you're gonna say, "I need a change."
Right,
So and
right.
so I need something different. And so can you apply some of that then and help us think through how that thought process of change applies to business. And I just want to put one precursor. I've always thought about that if you when growth occurs, either depth or above the tree above the ground is change. You always have to be, I guess, going through a process of change, but yet being the same. And so when you talk about change management, give us some principles and things that we can put to practice in business and help us think through how to be the same but yet change.
Right. Well, yeah, a couple of things come to mind really. When we were doing the research on this, these are kind of everyone will understand this, but let me just say it up front. Everything's changing all the time anyway. You've been changing from the day you were born. From that point, well, from conception, in my view, you've been changing. You've been developing, growing, whatever the case may be. You and I have been doing stuff together for a long time now, and we've gone through all kinds of changes. We've moved residents, we've moved offices, the life changes go on, kids grow up. So it's not like change isn't familiar to us as individuals. We have been changed, and organizations change all the time. Was recently in Kansas City, where I grew up, went by my old high school, went by my old grade school. The high school is now a bunch of apartments, inner city apartments that are super nice. Couldn't afford to live there now. But, I went to school there in that building, but the building is still there. It's still beautiful. But so change is always happening. The speed of change because of technology is really relentless at times. I try to keep up. I know you do with technology, but even that, it just moves so fast. And so I kept that in mind. Then another key point is that change in an organization, change tends to be nonlinear. And what I mean by that is what's going to change, even though let's say we've got to add on a new department to take on new clients. It seems like everything should be in a straight line, but it's not. It's up and down and around and through, and it's all of those things. So it's not like this very predictable pattern of 1, 2, 3, 4, like that, right? And so to be effective, what we found out in our research work was to really be effective in taking an organization through change is you need a predictable way to kind of understand the human side, the people side. So I'm not going to talk about systems and strategies and all of those kind of things. I want to talk about the human beings because that's what I was getting asked about. We know how to put in new computers, maybe buy more trucks, buy more planes, do more of what we do, but it's the people side of it that was kind of a mystery for the clients.
So what is it as people, and I don't know if this is the exact path that you're going to take us on, but when you hear the word change, what what is it that we as people dislike about change, and how does change management solve that?
Yeah. Well, hmm, that's a good that's a good question. I think for most of us, we get in a pattern of behavior. We have habits. If you break it down into knowledge, skills, attitudes, and habits, our work habits, once they get set up, we don't like to change those. So if let's say I learn how to do something in my work, I learned how to do that. And then you come along and you say, well, that's great. You finally mastered that, but I got to change that. Then I have to go through and build I have to go get some new knowledge, develop some new skills, maybe, and develop some new habits. So the attitude is going to be a big factor, right? Are you Are you gonna accept the change? Are you gonna resist it? You gonna push back on it? That kind of thing. And so we'll talk about that in a minute. We'll talk about resistance to change because that's pretty normal. I've got it down now. I finally figured out how to use this, how to do something. And now in order to keep my job or, you know, advance in what we're doing, I have to go through a whole nother set of changes all over again.
Yeah, so it
So
seems to me that you're saying that, and as I'm hearing you, that change will take effort. Change is going to require me to think differently, to not always be comfortable. I was thinking of the illustration, and I heard this a long time ago, and I only needed to hear it once, and I think it may have characterized what you're saying, and that was when NASA was talking about going to the moon. They said the only way you can get to the moon is constant changes that need to be made. So you have the target, but because everything is constantly moving, there's constant adjustments that have to be made along the journey, constant changes that has to be made to get you to the destination. I think that's what you're telling us. So talk to us about the change management process that has been so effective over these many years. Give us
okay.
some points.
Yeah, so there's just 5 things. We kind of broke it down to 5 different things, that you need to pay attention to. Let's say you're a business owner and you've got to go through some change. Most all of our work, and I know most all of your work over the years has been the change associated with growth. Now, there is some change associated with downsizing. The same principles will apply, but I'm going to focus on, let's say you're growing, the organization's growing. The first thing, and we're going to talk right here, let's talk to business owners, leaders, key managers, that level of people. All right. So the first thing we found out is you need to demonstrate some empathy instead of, and change needs to be from the bottom and from the top. You can't just walk in and start dictating unless you're in the military and you know, you could do that. But most of us are not. So we need to have some empathy toward the people that are going to have to change. So by that, what we looked at was all change is personal. If you're asking me to change, even though it has to do with the business, trust me, it's personal because I'm the one who has to do the changing. So you need to understand that you're asking me to change and that's personal for me. Say, yeah, I'd like to change, but when it comes down to us, down to the fact, we don't particularly want to. You mentioned that earlier. So all change is personal. People don't like it. I like what Maurice Sheckman said years ago in one of his works. He said, most people don't like change, and those who say they do are just lying. They're not telling the truth, right? So change is personal, but change represents a sense of loss. And I think that's something we should keep in mind.
So
If
how
we're
do
going to,
we but how do we so when you say we have to show empathy and I need a task done, I want something done, let's say either differently or the way that the individual is not doing it, that's not the way I want it done. Or you want to introduce a new system, a new process. And to the point that you said, we live in a very we live in a very fast changing world now with AI and all of the different things that are happening. And so now I'm going to ask my staff or an individual, I want you to do something different. And when you say have empathy, just give me one example in our audience, one example of what that means. It still has to be done. I want this done. But when you say have empathy, what do you mean by that? Am I supposed to ask for permission? Am I supposed to, tell them I'm sorry? So what do you mean when
yeah,
you
I
say
think all of it. I think if let's say you have a meeting and you're going to You're going to upsize to a new system. I know you've been through this many times in your work. So we're going to have to upgrade to a new system, new software system. And so you call a meeting, and all you have to do to demonstrate empathy is to understand these two things and acknowledge it. Look, I know in order to adapt to the new system, this is going to feel like a loss. This is going to be personal for all of you, personal for me too. I'm having to go through it with you. It's a we thing. It's not you do it, that kind of thing. And so you acknowledge that you know it's personal and that you know in order to get this new system up, we're going to have to get rid of some other stuff. So I think empathy is demonstrated by simply having that meeting, having that conversation, and listening to the concerns that people have,
Okay.
right? We're going to talk about that next. But the 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 number one thing I think is just have that conversation, be open to it. Don't be defensive, be empathetic. It's if someone's in a car accident, let's say somebody hits you and with their car, it's not your fault, but they're hurt. They get hurt. And you jump out of the car and start screaming and yelling at them and threatening them or whatever. Not going to help. That
Right.
doesn't help the
Right.
situation. But if someone's hurt, you would immediately, most of us would immediately begin to show empathy toward that. Call 911, ask them if we can make them comfortable, whatever it is. And so it's that kind of thing because when an organization, when a leader announces we're going to a new system, let's say, it sends a shockwave through people immediately. We would think that they would go, "Oh, well, we've had lots of positive change. This is gonna be great." But our natural reaction is, "Oh, no, not again," right?
Right. Right.
We
Right.
just upgraded. Now you want me to do it again. So I think having a conversation where you can demonstrate some empathy about it, would be good. And then I think training them, encouraging them, uh I know working in the software world in a lot in medical stuff, just the fact of building an adaptive culture, a more agile culture where they're a part of the change, they're involved in it. It's not coming from top down all the time.
Right. Yeah. I'm reminded of another statement that I heard years ago, and I said, I only need to hear that once, and that is change is debilitating when done to you. It's exhilarating when done with you. And I say, you
Exactly.
know what? That is
Perfect.
that is just so true. And so I I sort of adopted the style in our business where things we had a logistics business at the time, as you know, and every day was different because there was you could have the same scenario every day, but it was different every day because you have weather factor, traffic factors, airline factors, people factors. And so even though it was the same situation set up, the um we had to be adaptive to the change because everything else was moving around. And so I would always invite the staff to the point that you said we would have regular meetings, ongoing meetings talking about how we would respond to this ever changing world. And I think to the point that you just said, it began to create that culture where everyone now was accustomed to
Right.
change. And so I have another question, and maybe that you'll answer this for us too as we go along. And that is uh, change is not controlling, or is it? So is change controlling or is change just part of what we go through, but it's not really, I'm not trying to control you. It's just part of the process of life.
Yeah. Well, we're all changing all the time. We get in these patterns and habits of doing our work. It's a stable environment. Most of us don't want chaos. Most of us don't want drama. We don't want chaos. We don't want to be shocked. This is one of the things that I had to deal with a lot. I would get leaders call me, owners of businesses or senior management people would call me and they would say, "The last time we went through a big change in the organization, we lost people. I had to deal with anger issues. I had to do," and it's all coming from that shock of of and believe it or not, for a long time, and maybe this is the case in some places. Leaders felt like they needed to hold the change close to their vest, not tell anybody until the last minute, and then dump it on people. That's the best way to do it. Nothing could be further from the truth. Let me tell you, nothing. You need to have a plan to roll it out let people know. I'll get to that in a minute when I get
Okay.
back to
Yeah, I was
resistance.
thinking I was
But
thinking of the early warning systems, right? You
right,
just let
right.
people go upfront as
Yeah.
early as you possibly can. And I usually use the uh, terms likely, might, could
Mhm.
happen to sort of set up
Yeah.
individuals in anticipation that something may be coming versus here it is. And then once again, we're not trying to I'm not trying to control folks
Right.
with
No.
this change. It's just the natural process. So what's the second thing you want to tell us?
Okay, so first of all, demonstrate some empathy,
Demonstrate
right?
empathy.
Number 2, understand your people. You need to understand human behavior and all of that. And sometimes leaders are so busy with their work and with their responsibilities, they don't take time to assess the culture that's around them. And so there's 2 things that we found out. Number 1, people are very complicated. People are complex. Human beings by nature are complex, right? It's hard to nail that down, but the connection between psychological, physiological, sociological, spiritual dynamics, all of us are really complicated people. And so we do things the way we do because they make sense to us. And then you come along and you dump something on me and saying, well, we're going to change this. You know, your work's going to change, the system's going to change. And it does throw us into a bit of a shock. So understanding that these people are going to react, Mary in bookkeeping might not even react. She's like, oh, well, whatever. I'm used to it. Carl down in manufacturing, he may throw up his hands and go home and quit.
Right.
He's your best engineer and he's like, yeah, I'm out of here. So you need to understand that everyone's a little bit different. Everyone's going to respond a little bit differently. Now, the second side of that is the good news is that people are highly predictable. The way what we went through a lot of research of other people, a lot of research projects looking at this. And human beings are highly complex, but they're extremely predictable in how they're going to react based on personality. You can do personality inventories, you can do values inventories, communication inventories. There's all these inventories that can be done very easily, and you can understand. Uh, Most of us, depending on personality values and learning styles, we have been responding to change the same way for years. So if
Mhm.
someone's worked with you for a while, you should understand what to do. When I'm teaching this with my students, I often talk about marriage, or a romantic partnership, whatever you call it. I don't know what do you think the reaction would be if you're out of town, your wife calls you up and says, yeah, we're having a baby tomorrow. We're going to start tomorrow having a family. you know, you you should have given me some heads up if you're 8 months along, and I'm out here traveling the world trying to make a living, and I find out we're having a baby tomorrow. That's not gonna go over well. And if you've been married to someone or in a relationship with someone for a while, you probably can predict how they're gonna handle a crisis or change, any of these kind of things. So that's just it, is understand human beings. There's plenty of information about it. The third thing, though, is really a core thing is communicate very clearly what's about to happen. This is where I saw a lot of mistakes made. The earlier you engage your people in a conversation about the change, the better off it's going to be. I
Yeah.
just I found the opposite. People would go, "No, we're not telling them that, and we're gonna be kicking this off in August. We're not gonna tell them till July 30, we're gonna hold that back." No, the earlier you announce that things are going to change, the more quickly you can begin to build support for it, right?
Yeah.
The
Yeah.
longer you wait, the more shock factor that you're going to interject into it.
Yeah. You
So
had me. I was gonna say you had me laughing when you said if your wife called you up and said that you're having a baby tomorrow, the first thing thought to myself, I better know that, right? I better have known that 9 months ago.
I should know. Right,
I better
right.
have, I said, if that's news to me, I got a real problem. So,
Well,
and that's a great. I think you just gave me some little shock therapy, but that's a great illustration of if you just spring something upon someone. He said, "Wait a minute, shouldn't I have known that right?
exactly.
Right when when the seed was planted, should
Well,
when he
honestly,
planted the seed in my mind."
how many times you think someone, let's say in the IT department, I'll pick on the IT people, uh, because they're easy to pick on. So guys in the IT department, you've known as a business owner that you're going to put in a new system. You've known that for a year, and you didn't tell these programmers that, or these hardware people or software people. You didn't tell them till it comes in the mail. It's time to implement. You don't say anything, and they're like, "Wait a minute, this is our world here. This is our area, and you're telling me that you knew about this 6 months ago and you didn't say anything to us." See, that creates a tension between leadership and the technical workers, and that's not healthy for you or them, right?
Yeah, and
The
I'm
other
thinking.
thing Go ahead, go
Yeah,
ahead.
I was gonna say, and I'm thinking too of the many different experiences we had in our business where you have annually insurance premiums that may go up, and
Exactly.
that affects the staff. And so, how do I do? I need to make sure that to your point, deliver that news with empathy, deliver it early, and sometimes I need to, even though I've just found out, I need to delay to make sure that people have enough time, not just come in and dump it on them. And so these concepts that you're sharing with me and our audience are critically important because change is coming, and this happened almost annually. And if there was a change that maybe I had to raise a pricing with my customer, the last thing that they want is tomorrow we're going to raise the rate.
Right,
They will say, "Well, wait a minute, we need to
right.
sit
They don't
down and
want a
talk about."
surprise.
Yeah, sure, sure, okay,
Well, and also along with that is, say it early, say it often. Say it often. Communicate the benefits of the change often. Don't just say it once. I've had to deal with crisis with leaders. They go in, they have a meeting, they say it one time, they don't talk about it. All of a sudden it happens. People are upset about it. Well, say it over and over again. You got to say it over and over. These people are busy, they have other things occupying their time. So you want to put communication out there. You also, when you're saying it often, I think this is critical. Identify the problems or the roadblocks, the challenges. Go ahead, talk about them now. If we talk about them now before it starts, we're going to be much more prepared to deal with it. But when something doesn't work as promised and you have never discussed it with anyone, then it becomes, again, another challenge to overcome. And you're too busy to have to deal with this. So, again, we're just hitting the highlights today. Say it early, say it often,
okay.
talk about what's coming. Step 4, I would suggest involving everyone you can, from the bottom line, the bottom down, whatever workers, all the way to the top. Don't leave people out of the loop. When you do that, I think it creates another, again, stress in relationships, stress uh, between individuals. Here's my number one principle: most of us don't resist our own ideas.
That's good. That's good.
Yeah,
Yeah,
practice that. Most people don't resist their ideas. But if we don't listen, this is where listening, comes in. If we involve everyone, we need to listen. We need to listen to people. The majority of our employees are much less resistant to change when they have an opportunity to participate. That's what our study was showing. Let them participate. Oh, well, some of them are going to be negative and they're going to push back. I'd rather them be negative and push back on the front end than I would in the middle when we're trying to get stuff done.
or at least haven't been invited into the conversation. And
Exactly.
and perhaps
Well,
that goes back to the statement
mhm,
that I made, but I have a question for you. The statement that I made when I said change is debilitating when done to us, is exhilarating when done with us.
yeah.
What do you do when you have the majority of people who don't want to change, but the change still needs to happen? So, because this is not a necessarily democratic process, you know, as the leader, this needs to happen. Is not good news. Maybe there's a premium that is going to go up, and the people are not along with them. How do you is there a process? Is there a right way and or best way, I should say, in which you're to affect that change? I think I heard you say do it often, have it early. But is it in my mind is telling me when you say empathy, maybe even to say that yeah, we know this is going to hurt. It's an
Right.
increase. It's going
Okay.
to cost. Is going to cost you. It's going to cost us. So perhaps in this regard, are you saying that full? Do you do a full disclosure of the impact of the change?
Well, I think so. In a majority of cases, when a nurse is getting ready to give you a shot or you're getting ready to go into surgery, what do they say? This is going to hurt.
Yeah, well, well, if it's a dentist, they lie to us and they say this is going to hurt a little.
Right.
I
It
said
turns
no.
out to hurt a whole lot. Right. Well, there is a so when we're talking about this involving everyone, this is a key point. Consensus occurs in groups. If you have a group of people, consensus around this, like acceptance of what's going to happen, occurs not when everyone agrees. The research is very clear. Consensus occurs when everyone feels like they've been heard.
Hmm. Okay.
Yeah.
Yeah.
You know,
Okay.
for about 5 years, I had to do marriage counseling. It was part of my job. Number one thing I heard on both sides of the table, he don't listen to me. She don't listen to me. Even when he listens to me, he doesn't hear me. He doesn't hear what I'm saying. She talks, but she don't listen. She doesn't hear what I'm saying. When when I go into a company and I'm working with people and I go down to a department, shut the door, have a frank conversation with people. They go, "You know what? They don't listen. Upstairs, they don't listen to me. They don't hear what I'm saying." Now, here's the funny thing. It's not funny, but I wish every leader in the world knew this. I could convince them of it. People do not have to agree with you to build consensus toward a change. What they need from you is for you to listen to them and for them to leave that room feeling like you heard what they had to say.
Right. Right.
In fact, we've done a number of things over the years to prove this. You can go in a room with 10 people. They could disagree with you. They could say, "We don't need to do this, Glenn. This is not a good time. This is not the way to do it." Da da da. And you honestly do everything you can to hear what they have to say. Let them talk it out. I know you're busy. You got stuff to do. Relax, listen, lean back, get in a good posture. Hear everything those 10 people have to say. You can literally walk out of that room, do the opposite, and they feel good about it. When I go back and talk to them, they go, "You know what? It's been hard. It's been rough. We didn't want to do it, but he listened to us. He heard what we had to say." And that makes them feel involved in it, right?
Right. Right. Yeah.
You
I've
don't
done
have
it.
to agree with them. You
Yeah.
just have to listen. And I wish every leader would understand that.
Yeah.
Things
I
would
think
go much
I've
smoother.
had I've had many conversations with my staff over the years. Our 20-year history, where you had to bring some very tough news, news that was not favorable, and news that was not favorable to them, and to the point that you just share with us is listening. Number one, not just saying, I know. Well, how do you know? How do you know what they're going through? So you have to listen to them because everybody's going through, and to the point that you said earlier, personal situations. So one person situation is quite different from another's. And so you had to take the time to listen to them. And then I would then respond, yes, I hear exactly what you're saying. And, yes, this increase of the premium. We no longer, because it in our world, oftentimes as leaders, it's hard to take something back once you've given it. So
That's
if
right.
you say, okay, well, we're going to have, and I'm reminded of insurance where we say, well, it's going to be 50-50. You pay 50% of the premium, we do 50%. And then the premiums keep going up, up, and up. And so later on, we had to say, well, we're going to have you do 70%, we do 30%, or we were taking certain benefits, maybe it's dental, maybe it's something else. And we said, we can no longer provide that. And so you have to listen to the individual who will tell you how this really is going to impact me. And then I have to really hear that and say yes. And then I think to the point that you're also saying being empathetic, I had to use word, yes, this is unfortunate. I agree, I had to agree with them that yes, this is painful and I don't like it as much as you, no much as you like it. But then when we actually, for lack of better words, implemented or executed on the decision, you're right. The tension was a lot less because the individual felt like they were heard, even though they didn't like what was going on in that change. And we had to do that frequently,
Yeah.
where there was just changes in the organization. A customer may have required us to do something quite differently that we didn't necessarily want to do. And we were comfortable in a way in which we were managing a certain process. And the customer said, no, we need you to make this change. And so
Right.
it required people.
If you're trying to grow your business, which a lot of people watching this, listen to this podcast, that's your whole point with the Win with Glenn podcast and with the IOL Legacy podcast. We're trying to help you. We're trying to do everything we can to provide in you know insights into how to avoid things. And I think this idea of involving people, we've tested this quite a bit actually over the years. One of the things that businesses don't often value is leaking information.
Hmm,
Leak it out. Let it get out. Plan. Now, in all of these 5 things that we're talking about, when we put the link in and we'll give people the broader, more information, there's strategies in there that we've used to help our clients. But one of them is before you announce a change initiative, figure out who you need to meet with first, second, third, fourth, and let the information leak out properly so that, if I get the information a little bit ahead of time, I kind of know something's happening. That helps prepare me. And then you call me in and say, hey, this is what's going to happen. I already know it. I already know about it.
right,
And
right,
instead of trying to keep it a secret, let it leak on out. Let it come on out. Things are going to change. This is what's coming. Then when you have your formal meeting, you got people in there sitting there going, I already knew all about this, right? I already knew about it. And so for a leader, sometimes they think they don't value that. For me, I'm like, good. You knew
right,
about it. You're prepared for it. So there's less pushback. Another factor in that I th it's valuable in involving people is that you will identify potential barriers because there are people barriers, right? There are people that are gonna resist. That we're gonna talk about that in a minute. But you're also gonna identify some roadblocks. Some of your people are smart, hopefully, and they're gonna go, "Hey, have you thought about this? Have you thought about this? Have you thought about what's gonna happen?" They're gonna tell you if you hire the right people, they're smart, they're there, they're gonna tell you what you're gonna run up against. Maybe you anticipated everything, but maybe you didn't. Maybe
no,
you
this is
missed some
good.
things.
Yeah, this is good. This is good. So change is less of buy-in, and even buy-in is great, but it's less of buy-in and more of being informed and making sure that everyone understands and that you indicated to your point once again the empathy, the implications, the human side of the impact of the change. What's the fifth item, Jim?
Okay, so the last one that kind of ought to be obvious, it's that you ought to anticipate that resistance is gonna happen. if I know that a certain number, a certain percentage of my people, and I've identified who's this going to be the hardest on, et cetera, who's going to push back because I'm already seeing it, right? I'm letting it out. I'm letting the info out. So resistance is really normal. It's a normal human response to things. It's, I mean, it's just typically something that we all do. It's tied to fear mostly, losing power, losing control on what's going on around me in my little world. I need to anticipate. Studies have shown why humans resist change. So I'll go down some of them. This comes from just a broad look at research on human behavior. All right. So when the purpose of the change is unclear, we don't like it. We don't
Okay.
like it. You tell me we're going to upgrade, but you're not telling me why.
Right.
So, you know, number two, when they're not involved in planning for it. So if the C-level people, and this is my world I lived in for so long. So my C-level people, they did all the planning for what's going to happen. They didn't involve anyone else. Bookkeeping's going to get impacted the most, but we didn't talk to those people until we're ready to go. Yeah, they're going to push back. So the earlier you involve them, the better. When the change is coming from a personal perspective, if I'm the owner of the company and I come in and I say, look, we're changing because I want to change. This, this is best for me.
Right.
If they feel like the change is based on your personal issue, you're not considering me, that's going to raise the
No,
resistance.
that's good. That's good.
Yeah.
'Cause and certainly, and I don't want to interrupt your cadence there, but
No, you're good.
certainly, as you said, oftentimes, and I've seen this in organizations when someone wants to implement and or see a change just based upon one person or one experience
Right. Yeah.
with no thought process, no concern for the entirety of the well, I just want to do this, or here's how I do it, and have no regard for it. So that's good, Jim. What's the other
Yeah.
ones?
I've heard this many times. Well, we know where this is coming from.
Right,
I know who's behind this. Bob over in accounting, he's,
right,
this, I know he's the one behind it. Right. You want to avoid that as much as possible. So if, saying, well, Kathy down in the warehouse, she wants this, and that's why we're doing it. That's not going to work because if you change something in a warehouse, it changes everyone's work,
right,
right?
right,
You don't think it does, but it does. You look deeper. So that's one thing. If it's a personal appeal, I try to avoid that. Another thing is ignoring the standards. You mentioned this earlier, building this culture where, in the logistics business every day, whether back up at the airport, whatever's going on, there's all this variables constantly going on, right? So you build a culture. Well, not all companies are like that. When I would go into companies that have a very stable workflow, right? People get used to doing it. This is the standard operating procedure. This is how we do it. And nothing changes very often. You have to be aware of that. If you're going into a real agile organization and you're bringing about change, it's probably not that difficult for people to adapt. But I'll give you an example like financial organization where you're following the same procedures day in and day out. Every once in a while, the law changes or something changes. You go in there and just throw change on these people. They really, in fact, I've seen them walk out of the building.
right.
I've seen
Yeah,
it in medical too. It's one of my nightmare stories. I got a call from one of my large clients to fly down to uh, southern part of a state in Utah, where in a big hospital, we had 700 nurses, and they were threatening a walkout.
yeah, yeah.
Well, when nurses walk out, let me tell you, the hospital, everything's going to shut down tomorrow. You do not want a physician taking care of you. You want the nurse taking care of you. And so I had to get on a plane, fly to Vegas, get a car, drive up to this town. and try to intercept what was about to happen. And so I met with the chief of all the nursing departments, sat down with them, and I'm straightforward, what's happening? Tell me what's going on. I understand they're going to shut the hospital down. Nurses are going to walk out tomorrow morning at 9 o'clock. And, tell me what happened. Well, what happened was no one told them that this new system was coming. No one told them what's going to happen. No one asked their opinion on this. They weren't involved. So now the chief medical officer in that group is calling me going, I don't know what the problem is. I don't know what the problem is with these nurses. They just all of a sudden they're going to rebel. And well, I happen to know that the chief medical officer and all of those folks knew about this 6 months ago. And they just kept not wanting to say anything, not wanting to involve nurses. And look, in a hospital, the hospital runs because the nurses run. That's why.
Right. Yeah.
That's what happened. Offense to anyone else, any of my colleagues, but so the standards of acceptance would be listening to people who need to be listened to. Understanding the fear of failure. We don't want to fail. We want to succeed. And so these are all things that happen that we should anticipate. Now, let me say one last thing about that. Even though you have a lot of resistance to the change, disloyalty is actually very rare. I sat down with these nurses, not all 700 of them, but I'd say 300 of them. Okay. And I sat there and I listened to their concerns, and I understood, I had the medical officers there. I had people there apologizing, apologize. We
Right.
didn't involve you. I'm sorry. We should have done better. All right. So here's what the research says that the numbers would be. The general rule is 20% of the people are going to resist no matter what happens, right? 20% of us are just not going to like it. I don't care what you do. 50% of us are going to remain neutral till we figure out whether we need to do this or not. Then 30% of the people are going to keep on resisting no matter what you do, right? So 20% will get on board once they have a conversation, they feel like they've been heard. 50% of them are going to stay neutral for a while, and then they're going to shift over. That's 70% right there. That all you have to do is follow this little model, and you're going to have 70% buy-in on the front end. Now, all you have to do is work with the little bit of resistance that you have left. And if you know that that's normal, people are not going to leave. These nurses, just using that example, these nurses did not want to shut down a hospital. Trust me.
Right.
They did
Right.
not want to lose their job. They didn't want to appear to be disloyal to the leadership. But the leadership put them in a position to where some of them were willing to sacrifice their job. And we're not talking about a big city here. We're not, it's not like Atlanta where you and I lived, where if somebody leaves one job, they can simply go 5 miles and get another one. This is a rural area. So they didn't want to do that. So disloyalty really in the end is rare. And you're not going to have near the resistance if you do the other 4 things
Yeah.
along the way.
And it reminds me too, lastly, as we wrap this up, that certainly you want to have all these principles that you share with us in place and very much focus on the leadership. I'm reminded that we had many different offices around the country. And if I had a leader who was leading a specific office and you didn't engage them into any change, you didn't get them early into the process, you didn't have empathy, even though they are leading, that if you didn't do all these things that you spoke to us about, they would not be on board. They will actually be leading as an
Right.
adversary,
Yes,
somebody who's
exactly
not
right.
on board, and sadly, I had a few of those, but
Yeah.
when you were speaking of resistance, it reminds me, as I sum it up, one of the things that I was always reminded of is in terms of empathy that I want to share with the audience is I started off with saying people want change, but they don't want to change. And so I've always taken a tack, and I think this is what you have helped us think through here today, Jim, is I really don't want you to change. I want you to change your ways. So so
Right.
you can stay to be who you are, but I just want you to change your ways, and we want to show you a way, hopefully the best practice ways, etc., so that people can still be their individual, still be who you are, but there are best practices, there's best ways to do certain things. And Jim, you have, although I've been a proponent of change management or in a change leadership for years, you certainly have helped me think through some things as well, some things that I've been on the surface, but I think I could do even deeper dives even now in my career and even personal life. And so I do very much appreciate you taking the time
You're
out.
welcome.
I
Well, I
know
think
with
we all yeah, I'll end mine. I think we all could do a better job. That's what drove me into this a number of years ago. That's why I spent a couple years of my life diving into it, is because, you know, all of us could do a better job. We could
yeah,
be a better job as as a spouse or a friend, a family member. We could be a better boss. We could be a better worker. So it's just if we can grab onto some things that we can put in our pocket to really help us, just sharpen us up a little bit. Our lives are going to be much richer, much easier. Especially leadership is not an easy task. Management's not an easy thing.
yeah.
We laugh. We say, "Well, it's like herding cats." It is if you don't do certain things, but you can herd cats. You gotta put them. You gotta put them in a straitjacket, but
Yeah, well, you also going to get hurt along the way. So we're going to wrap this up, everybody, with "Win with Glenn," and I'm gonna quote a very famous song and a person that is no longer with us, but he said, "If you want to make the world a better place, take a look in the mirror and make that change." And that is man in the mirror. So it starts with you to make the change. Take these principles that has just been shared with us by Jim Chambers. Jim, thank you, Dr. Jim Chambers from the Institute of Organizational Leadership. Look in the mirror. You start with the change. And if you do this with everyone in your organization and in your life, you'll make the world a better place. I'll see you all next time. Win with Glenn, Change Management. See you next time.